Welcome everyone to Magic the Gathering Jank, where we talk about some weird and wonderful cards you probably never thought of playing. Before we start the episode, I want to make a very quick correction based on the Pirates of the Pandemonium pilot episode, which is it does not work the way I think it does with Prosper the Tomebound because of how playing the card and putting to play works. See, entering the battlefield effects don't actually count as you casting the card, or in this case playing the card, so you do not make the treasures from the card. Regardless, Pirates of Pandemonium is still a very funny card, and it's still worth considering, but today we're going to be talking about something different. Today I'm going to be telling you about one of my favourite commander choices from Strixhaven, Codie the Vociferous Codex. Codie is a 3-mana artifact creature that taps a 4 and adds all 5 colours to your mana pool. Then, when you cast your next spell, you exile the top card of your library till you hit an instant and sorcery that costs less than the original casted spell. Exile that card, and you can cast that card until the end of the turn. However, Codie's first line of text does read, "You can't cast permanent spells." So, for the cost of Codie only being able to play instants and sorceries, you get this weird little codex which has fake cascade. Some of the more common decks you see built around this ability is definitely deck types like Storm, which want to cast a lot of spells and eventually damage your opponent out of the game with a spell which copies itself a million times. Approach of the Second Sun, which is just a win the game card by itself, and just you use Codie's ability to get the value to get it back. Or abusing the zero cost cards such as Living End to revive an army which just enters play. But we're going to be taking advantage of the first line of text which says you can't cast permanent spells by turning Codie into a prison deck using Fractured Identity. Fractured Identity is a blue, white and free generic for sorcery that reads, exile a non-land permanent. Each other player other than its controller makes a token copy. Using this we can give everyone at the table a copy of Codie, which means they will gain the effect of they can't cast permanent spells. But let's be fair, this part is the obvious play and stuff you'll see in the deck suggestions for Codie as it is, because giving everyone a way to prevent them from casting spells makes sense. But we're going to add another layer onto this weird play by adding in a creature, which is the real star of our show today. Archon of Valor's Reach is a green, white and free for a flying vigilance trample 5/6, which when it enters you choose a non-creature spell type. Players can't cast spells of the chosen type. The idea with this card here, preventing them from playing a card type, is that you want to declare instants or sorcery depending on what your next spell is going to be. By declaring instants first, you can lock your opponents out of interacting with the next state, which is going to be a basic clone spell of some kind, copying Archon, allowing you to declare the other type. At this stage, your players can no longer play any permanent card types as well as instants and sorceries, leaving them with a 1/4 book and you with 2 5/6 flying tramplers. Now before you attempt to try pulling this combo off, I would definitely try finding a way to clear the board of creature threats, because if your opponents have a way of removing the fake Codie by attacking into another creature or sacrifice outlet, some way of removing Codie, the combo falls apart immediately, which is kind of not what you want to happen. It then leads to a game where one player can interact with you while the rest have to sit there and keep passing turns. What we want this game to end up being is not an immediate win con, but a game state where you can just say, guys, I have a board state which wins me the game. Basically, if I just continue hitting you over and over, do you want to call the round? It's an alternative way to say winning from Approach of Second Sun, which just wins you the game outright, or a combo deck which wants to just keep doing the same thing to win. You're essentially just doing the same thing, but instead with a prison style effect. Definitely discuss with your board group before you want to pull this type of combo off, because this is a very punishing combination of cards, and it's definitely something you want to make sure they are aware of what's happening before it goes off and you upset the table. Now, if you've heard all of this and you still want to play this horrible build, I would definitely suggest some key pieces to make this work. Ramping is going to be essential. These card combos are not cheap. Archon and Fractured Identity and a clone spell all in the same turn, like given the idea that Codie is already in play, that is not a cheap ask. As well as being able to play plenty of draw spells and shooter spells to find the pieces. Luckily for us, our commander really is a spell slinger, and the effect of Fate Cascading can definitely find us additional draw spells on top of what we already would have access to. So don't be afraid to use Codie's effect for yourself. Now, with Codie's effect in mind, don't be afraid to play permanent spells. I know his line says you can't, but if Codie is not in play, a Soul Ring, a Solemn Simulacrum is not going to do your miss because you're a fragile piece on the board and you definitely need any protection you can get, as well as cards which get you more mana to get to the pieces you need to play. You don't have to be a pure spell slinger if you don't want to be. Not to mention on top of this, since your combination in the end will prevent the other players from playing instant sorceries, including yourself, having a couple more creatures which can just hit the board will be useful, especially those with the flying variety, because you don't want them to have access to Codie being destroyed. You want to protect Codie at all costs for your opponents, because if they die, they get to play the game again and you don't win. But to round it out, also don't forget the removal cards. A Blasphemous Act or something to that effect, clearing out the board state before you play this Codie combo, will prevent them from being able to destroy Codie once they have a copy, because then you can just go off and repeat the process. If they have something which can't destroy Codies, that can usually be fine, but most times you want to make sure they have as little resources as possible so that you can just declare yourself the winner of the game. Last but not least, just remember this doesn't have to be your only win condition of the deck. The ones I mentioned at the beginning, the Storm combos, the Approach of the Second Sun, things like that, can still be included in this style of deck because having more than one win con is always a good idea. This is just an entertaining alternative suggestion of how to build Codie, which not many people discuss because Codie just looks like a spell sling on the surface, but could actually be one of the nastiest prison decks we've seen in a very long time, or at least in my opinion. But with that in mind, hopefully this gave you some ideas of how to use weird combo cards to create new possibilities for this commander. And until next time, happy deck building.